Jim, this next question sent via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com is from Johnny Chavez, San Jose, Costa Rica. Now that Jeff Jarrett is joining AEW as a writer, I don't think he's a writer, but I guess as a wrestling personality, it's becoming more and more obvious that AEW is turning into a refugee camp for ex-WWE employees. When AEW first began, it wasn't crazy to think that Tony Khan would hire ex-WWE talent based on their capacity and what they could bring to the table. Now it feels like Tony just wants to hire any ex-WWE, period. Is Tony turning into a new version of Dixie Carter? I would like to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, there's got to be a balance because, as I've said before, you'd be insane if Bryan Danielson wanted to wrestle for your wrestling promotion. You'd be insane not to fucking take him. That doesn't mean that, you need to take everybody that's ever worked for the WWE. There needs to be context. There needs to be a plan. There needs to be a happy minimum. I don't know that Jeff Jarrett gives people more of an impression these days of WWE rather than TNA more recently or the, Global Force or whatever. And you and I, Brian, have talked about this.
Yeah, I don't think he applies to this really so much.
Yeah, but the AEW fans are the really core AEW fans that are really just fans of that because they love the Cucamonga Kids and Twinkle Toes and the whole indie, the Puddin' Gang, the indie core of this thing. They think that anybody that's ever wrestled for a mainstream television promotion is somehow the outsider because they'll come in with their big names and their experience and tell my favorite wrestlers what to do. So there's that. It was the same kind of thing when the Ring of Honor fans wanted to see the fucking Super Smash Brothers more than they wanted to see fucking Hassan Benjamin or fucking Rhino or Lance Storm. If you read the comments that we got back in the day on the message boards, and by the way, folks, for those of you who don't know, and there are a lot of you, the Super Smash Brothers back then is the Dork Order. It's Fat fucking Uno and his partner. And they were still the shits even back then. Actually, they were shittier because they were dressed up as video game characters. But that's the kind of wrestlers. They wanted unknown wrestlers because it was part of their little private club. That's that subset of the audience. And then there's a part of the audience that doesn't mind seeing guys that have been on television promotions but can still go athletically and contribute to the product. And those are the most, reasonable. And then there are some that are, just want to see fucking names. And there's nothing you can do about that. They just want to see names regardless of what. But you've got to have, some kind of happy medium. You don't just bring in every name that becomes available. I know Tony has endless money because we've gone through his roster. And if it was $100 a week and he's paying 150 fucking wrestlers and half of them are never sell pussy on a troop train, much less a wrestling ticket, then he's got an unlimited budget. But then you've just cluttered the place up with a bunch of people that were beaten into powder before they last left their mainstream television position. Or he signed Mark Henry and Big Show and has put them in witness protection. And what the fuck? Okay, then either he's decided, well, I shouldn't have signed him, but he's still paying them, so why don't we see him? You mean to tell me that Big Show doing some kind of interview segment or something wouldn't get more attention than fucking Alex Marvez? But so It does bother me, like you said, with Jeff and Sanjay and Jay Lethal together, because now it's like TNA, and add the pinhead, and it looks like TNA with goddamn, somebody from the Howard Stern show. You don't want to call back to things that may not necessarily worked out well in the past. So I don't. If Tony's in a bad position because he's overstocked with members of the roster, but he's understocked on real talent. And if he brings anybody in that's been a name for any other company, then the core audience resents it because they want to see more Muffin Top Taylor. But at the same time, he's got to bring in people that, and any average wrestling fan or anybody that might become a wrestling fan would really want to get into and see, the Danielsons and the Punks. And that's not worked out well when he's brought in anybody with any opinion that differs from the EVPs. They generally get shot down and nullified. Remember 2 years ago, it was Jim Ross trying to fucking give him some advice. Now he just burps in their general direction every once in a while because he knows it's useless. So he's stuck. He doesn't run the company. So the locker room culture is run off and formed on its own without Tony being in charge of it. And what wrestler they bring in not only gets vetted by the fans, but by the people in the locker room. And it makes the locker room feel good. When he brings back somebody that's never contributed one penny to their bottom line, but they get in boo-boo face. When he brings in a star that tells the rest of them how to fucking act and maybe up their game. And then, as I said, you've got fans that are, as long as Twinkle Toes is bringing in imitation female wrestlers from Japan, they'll buy that. But they don't want to see anybody that's worked for the biggest wrestling promotion on the planet. So what do you fucking do?
The Saraya promo this past week, that was one of the big mistakes I thought in it, was her just acting like she's a bigger star because she comes from WWE, and that's like the last thing those fans want. If it's a WWE refugee camp, it's one thing, but when you shove it in people's faces, they resent it real quick.
Well, and that's the simile that you just came up with is better than Jeff Jarrett. Saraya is that she really is a WWE product. As far as I know, she comes from a wrestling family. As far as anybody in this country knows, though, they've only seen her in the WWE. So now she comes in there, and now it's the outsider to all of those people trying to fuck with Britt Baker, who's one of their more popular heels. And there was sarcasm dripping in that line, but let's remember, almost all of the AEW heels are very popular. So when you go to fucking with one of them, their fans are going to be territorial. And yes, and then Britt Baker, as all good heels do, told the truth about the babyface, and people got on her side. So yeah, that's a bigger example, I think, than Jeff. And we've talked about Jeff. He needs to be behind the scenes and potentially take a heavy hand in talent relations rather than at this point in his life or anybody else's being out there, working in the ring. And they got bigger issues. They need a fucking heart surgeon before they get the goddamn painter in.
Well, to the core of this question, the big issue is, and they have a few cases, but they need really good homegrown talent that they don't fuck up so that you don't have to rely on WWE people.
Yes. But, and once again, they had really good homegrown talent. They fucked a lot of it up. But you still always need a mix because homegrown talent is going to all be in their early mid-20s at this point on that show, and they need some experience to settle things down and smooth things out. And they need to have guys that will listen to that experience. And, so you need a mix, but you've got to there's no plan with putting this roster together to begin with, and there never has been. It's been who was friends with who, and who was an indie darling that people were tweeting about at the time. And that usually lasts about fucking 6 weeks to 3 months, and he signed people up for 3 years. So they're long past their Twitter expiration date, and people have moved on to the next fucking guy willing to make an ass out of himself in some fashion. You know, old Jelly and Nutella was a big deal on the Twitter for a few months. But then they sign somebody that's a joke that the people have just made something because they were tickled by something stupid he did. And it could be Jelly, or it could be any number of people that fit that description. Danhausen, whatever. Tony signs them for years. They've only got pockets. They got one fucking joke to tell. And then they're still telling it 2 years later, and he's still paying these people, and they've contributed nothing. And he's wondering why. It's because you don't just go after every X-star or every Twitter phenomenon or every darling indie person of the moment, because chances are most of them are not going to have legs. You have a fucking plan of your main top talent, some good names underneath, and a bunch of guys that can get those people over. And that's where you start. He never had any of that.